Hello, bossy friends. My name is Rachel. My business is Rachel Fisher Creative, and I am a graphic designer specializing in brand design for small businesses and entrepreneurs. I'm here today to talk brand identity. More specifically, I'm going to share with you the basic elements that you should have established within your visual identity to create distinction and consistency for your brand. Now, there are 6 items in the list that I'm going to share, and each one of them could certainly have their own deep dive topic of discussion because there is a lot to be said about each of them and a lot to consider about each of them. But for today, I'm just going to go through the list kind of quickly, give you some key information on each of them, and that'll be it. So let's get into it. The first one is the most important on the list, and it is not even a visual, it's strategy. Strategy is number one. You need to have a very clear understanding of your brand and your vision first and foremost. I recommend looking at your visual strategy in kind of 3 main areas. One is your business, so you and your business, your purpose, your vision, your mission, why and how you do business, where are you headed, what is your magic. The second is your audience. So who are they? What is important to them? How should they feel, when they come to you? How should they feel when they experience your brand? Your competition. So where do you sit in the marketplace? How are you different from other solutions out there? And what do they look like so that you can stand out from them? So once you have this strategy nailed down, then what happens is you have a super purposeful foundation from which you can stand and make confident decisions on your visuals. So for example, if your brand is all about connecting to the earth and your customers come to you because they want a peaceful escape, you're probably going to stay away from like bright fuchsia pinks, even if that's your favorite color. Working on visuals without this strategy in place is like building a house without a blueprint, right? It's like you're going to be making these hasty decisions as you go through that might not tie back to a holistic, well thought out plan. So number 2 is logos. And yes, there was an S on the end of that word, logos. I'm talking about a suite of logos, not just one. I recommend that you have various versions of your logos for 2 reasons. One is just that it provides some really nice depth and variety, and it gives your brand like a richness and a feeling of being fully built out. And 2 is on a functional level, and it's just that you likely need different versions for different applications. So, for example, the main version of your logo might look great when it's nice and big on the header of your website or on the signage out front of your space, but not so great when you have to squeeze it down into that little circle Instagram profile photo. So I suggest having a suite of logos, things like primary version, secondary version, stacked, horizontal, marks, multiple marks, versions with and without the tagline. You don't need, and you shouldn't go crazy. You don't need to go crazy, and you shouldn't have too many, and you don't need all of what I just said, but those are just some of the versions that you could think about having. Number 3 is a clear color palette. Again, it shouldn't necessarily be your personal favorite colors if that doesn't make sense for your brand and for your audience. The colors that you choose need to be rooted in strategy and in color psychology. And you also want to make sure you know the different color values for various applications. So CMYK, RGB, hex, Pantone. You need to understand when to use those, what they're for, and what the color values are for your brand colors in each of those scenarios. Number 4 is font system. I recommend having 2 to 3 typefaces and a convention in place for how and where to use them. So knowing, what is for headlines, what is for body copy, things like that. Also, make sure that any fonts you're using are licensed properly. Number 5 is photography style. Unless you're a photographer yourself or you have one that works with you for all of your stuff. I know this one can be tough, and I don't feel like this is something that you really need to drive yourself crazy over. But I would suggest at least having some level of strategy or standards in place like making sure all of your images have the same tone, level of contrast, similar lighting, or for Instagram, maybe using the same filter for all of your photos. Whatever makes sense for you, there needs to be some level of clear consistency in the style of your photos that both relate back to your brand strategy and complement the other elements within your visual identity. And last, number 6 is brand guidelines. So everything, all of these elements that we've just talked about, you want to tie it all together in a nice clear document that outlines how and how not to use these elements within your identity. Everything from which color versions of your logo are approved to, like I said, with the typefaces, which ones are for headlines, which are for callouts, and how they interplay with each other. Having this document is simply just to ensure consistency across all applications of your brand over time, no matter who or how many people touch it or work on your elements. So if it's just you and your business and you do all of your visuals and graphics yourself, having this is still really helpful because it kind of acts as your compass and your guide that you can always refer back to. And especially if you have others on your team that help out with visuals, or if you ever work with a graphic designer, this will be or should be one of the first things that they ask for. So there you have the 6 basics of your brand identity. And of course, there are a lot of other elements that could be included in a visual system. Things like custom patterns, icons, illustrations, certain graphics, layouts even. There are a lot of things that are really important and can be really important to a brand system. Some brands need stuff like that and some don't. Every business is different. But the list that I've given you today are at least the basic building blocks that you should have, that everyone I think should have to execute your branding consistently and confidently.